This is the Transcend in Life podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson, taking you from fear to freedom.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Transcend in Life. I'm really excited about today. I have a special guest named Sheryl Mercier. She is a business strategy coach, founder of the Surviving and Entrepreneurship community, and the host of the Resilient Entrepreneur podcast. Accolades for her include the Resilient Entrepreneur podcast debuted at number 15 in the U.S. entrepreneur category, as well as broke into the top 100 charts globally. She has worked with a wide range of businesses from nationally acclaimed nonprofits to major corporations like PayPal. She is mother to two little guys, age 4 and 7, and an Amazon International best-selling author. Other than me struggling saying entrepreneur today, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. I'm really excited for this. And you know what? I trip over that word myself and I say it multiple times a day.
It's one of those words. I know what it means. I think it's something that I do, but I'll tell you, sometimes it just gets me. So
that's okay. That's okay.
Tell me about your journey into entrepreneur, the world of being an entrepreneur and coaching. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, messy is the word that comes to mind when I really talk about my journey. A little painful, a little messy, a little joyous, all wrapped up in a bow. I like to joke because way back when I went to college, I actually went to college to be for theater and music, believe it or not. And, I was going to sing, I was going to be on stage, all of these things. And then life obligations hit and I was, I needed to make money. So I got a master's degree in managing nonprofits, which is like an MBA for the nonprofit sector. But then I jumped into technology because that's the logical path for, a theater kid to follow. And I ended up running high-tech teams, one of them being PayPal Europe. And I learned a ton and I did that for a decade. And then when my second son was born, things got a little rockier. And I say rockier because my first son, right in the midst of my running PayPal EU's team, and it was just crazy, had a pretty massive seizure. And, he took us down the path of some pretty major medical issues, not just seizures, but aspirating into his lungs, lots and lots of things on his end. And then when my second one was born, I joke and I say he was like, here, hold my beer, because he came out with a whole slew of other stuff. And at the time when I was on maternity leave, our business unit had been bought and sold, and, the team was outsourced. I was laid off. And looking back, I'm not sure that I would have been able to keep up at that pace while juggling two kids with pretty critical medical issues. So I decided to jump into entrepreneurship, partly out of, wanting to build something of my own as well, because corporate land is great. If you're that kind of person and that's what floats your boat, great. But for me, I think I was also at a point where I didn't recognize myself. I didn't like who I'd become. I was very far from my beginning of being like a creator and a creative personality. So I took that as kind of an opportunity. It was hard as hell because I built two businesses, one being a great group of women within a networking company, and then, my own personal business, amongst doctor's appointments, amongst juggling both my kiddos being pretty sick and in and out of hospitals, as well as, I went through, I think I'm on my fourth diagnosis at this point. I just actually had another one 2 weeks ago. So, when I talk about the resilient entrepreneur, that's a purposeful thing that's really close to my heart because I've been through a lot of the fires, and I know there are people out there too that have been through bigger ones than me too, and are still out there trying to make a difference. But, part of my motivation too, and I guess my why, or whatever you may call it, for doing what it is that I do is making sure that people can show up in a light that is true to them and that works for them. And in order to do that, business strategy comes to mind, which is kind of my sweet spot given my, decade in corporate America. And then the self-help stuff kind of comes in play as well, because that's what's gotten me through. a lot of the stuff. So I've learned a lot around along the way in this messy journey. So that's kind of, how I got here.
Well, I think resiliency is probably, there's a reason you use that word, and it's so accurate. My goodness, even just that brief little, and I didn't get all the details. I don't need to. I mean, that was a lot.
Yeah.
Resiliency, that is not exactly something that you probably learned in school, right? That wasn't like, hey,
No.
here's your resiliency course, go. You obviously learn it, you teach other people what that really means, but can you kind of talk about what it does mean and how people can really maybe build upon so that when they are getting their, teeth kicked in, or they're kind of getting life thrown at them, how do they persevere through that?
Yeah, I mean, there's my number one go-to is there's a great quote by Sheryl Sandberg, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't remember it fully off the top of my head, but where she speaks about resilience as a muscle, and that you don't have kind of this finite amount that just runs out, but that you build it up over time, and I think that quote ends with something along the lines of like, and in the process, you become someone that you never thought you could become. Right. So when I think of resilience and I think of, and that was just a snapshot at the last 10 years of my life. Right. And I think we all have the stories from way back that kind of formulated who we are today as well. But I think when I really think about resilience, I think about that muscle, and I think about for every time we've been hit, or for every time any one of my clients gets hit or knocked down, resilience truly is the ability to get back up again and then learn from that hit. So I didn't just wake up one day and know how to juggle all the things that I've juggled. I think some people may think that is a thing that I'm just such a great multitasker. No, I've paid attention to every hit I've been dealt, and I've learned from them tremendously. And that's what I like to instill in people, is that life is not always going to be rainbows and butterflies. It's never going to be that way. And I feel as if the quicker we know that, and it's not to be doom and gloom, but the quicker we realize that there is a yin and yang to the world, that you wouldn't really fully recognize the joy without that pain, the quicker we can start learning from the times that we get knocked down.
I mean, that makes a ton of sense to me. And Sheryl, for those of you who aren't familiar with her, she lost her husband, and that was like, whoa. And obviously you're talking about kids. I mean, my goodness,
Yeah.
that is the one thing that just, thank gosh, knock on wood, I've been very fortunate, but, I don't want to know, but you had to face that. How do you keep that perspective and show up in the workforce when you have so much personal adversity going on? Because I think they're so tied together. I'm just curious, do you have a formula for that? Because I want to know. I need it.
Yeah. I think my main number one, I love work. Maybe sometimes potentially to a fault, but I love what I do here. And and I've always, and this is the theater person in me and that creator, that, if something bad or good or something that evokes emotion happens in my life, it's really great to translate that into work for me. Because I know every time I get up and I give a talk or we do a podcast like this, what keeps me going in the back of my head is that there is someone else listening who thinks it was, I've heard women when I've given talks before say, oh, I thought that was just me. Like, so my ability to speak it after the fact is kind of what keeps me going as well. Because the more I can learn, the more I can make even one person feel like they're not on an island by themselves, and through coaching or through speaking or whatever that might be. So I guess, that boils down to paying it forward, I guess, from a strategy perspective, which I think some people may be like, oh, how do I just pay it forward when I'm getting kicked on the ground? It doesn't happen right in that moment. It never does. But for me, I think ever since I was little, I went through quite a bit of adversity growing up, and I've always had to have that belief that everything is there to teach us, right? That there's no other option for me, rather than there will be something on the other end of this tunnel. And it will, for every bad, there has to be a good. So that's, my formula. I guess in a little bit of a nutshell to try to get you through that stuff.
Well, one of the things that you continue to bring up is this community. And you even said, gosh, I built up this amazing network. And now it's like, oh, you don't want to leave that. And so, but as an entrepreneur, you can feel so alone. You can feel
Yeah.
like no one understands what I'm going through. And you know what I mean? So you keep coming back to community. How do people, how can they find more of these communities if they are feeling on an island? Because I promise you, someone listening today is
Yeah.
having those emotions. So do you have some places and some thoughts? I mean, obviously go to your podcast. That's amazing.
Thank you.
But some other ideas for those entrepreneurs or anybody out there that feels like they're on an island?
Yeah, I mean, my advice to you, if you're listening right now and you're looking for a group, is number one, it exists. I think sometimes we get discouraged or we don't have the energy to do the searching for it. But I also think that it doesn't require a large number of people in that community, right? Because sometimes people are looking for like that Facebook group they fit in or this huge tribe that they need to be a member of. And for me in those times of darkness, it was, and as an entrepreneur, especially because you need someone to say, get off the ground and do your job. It sometimes I would give the advice that it's quality over quantity. If you are out there looking, in specific groups, like I run a chapter right now of a group called Polka Dot Powerhouse, which is a women's connection group, not networking group, because I'm a big believer in making that connection over kind of just passing business cards. So for me, I look for the people who are willing to connect on a human level first, and then the business kind of organically comes behind it. And that hasn't steered me wrong so far. And I actually find it more enjoyable that way to do business with people of that nature. But I mean, just from a purely tactical standpoint, if you're someone listening to this and, you don't have a tribe or you don't know where to find a tribe, you can try them on for size, but if you don't have that, look who's in your direct orbit. Or, reset your own personal expectations around what that tribe and community looks like. Because it could just be 2 people and not 30 or 40.
I'm curious just because, again, as a theater major, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, Michelle's not afraid of anything. She just goes, right?
Okay.
But clearly there's something here where you have to get those butterflies in your tummy, or you certainly get like, I don't know if I can do this, but you overcome, or you certainly, I'm just curious to dig into your mind a little bit to go, when you get those trepidation or like, I don't know if I can do this, how do you overcome it? Because I think so many people, that's where they get stuck. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's scary. I'm going to shut down. So do you have a certain process, or do you just go for it?
I think for me, part of it is just going for it. But also, part of it is not ignoring or shoving down those fears and those emotions. I think people back off from it because they don't want to feel it, right? They don't want to feel that uncomfortable fear. I mean, there's a saying from a speaking perspective and from a theater perspective, if there's ever a point when you don't get nervous, stepping foot on a stage, maybe it's time to find something else to do, because it's that nervous energy. It's that, that little bit of fear that as a catalyst for me in getting on a stage or getting on a podcast. But I also respect it. I think that is the number one thing that I talk to clients about and that I practice myself, is that I don't say, get out of here, fear. I have things to do. I don't say that. I just sit there and I say, okay, Michelle, I know this is going to scare the hell out of you, but what are you going to learn from this? What is going to be on the other side of fear for this? And there is something to be said about, sitting in hospital rooms with your kids. Not a lot more, not a lot of stuff scares me when you've seen that, I think. Maybe that's part of it as well.
Well, that's certainly a perspective to have, that these trivial challenges or problems that we deal with, it's not life and death, right?
Right,
In the
exactly.
business. So maybe that's the perspective that you keep. I don't know. I'm just, it sounds that way to me. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I think keeping everything in perspective, like you said, right? Like It was funny when I used to work in corporate, we did mainly email marketing, right? And around the holidays, it was insanity. Like Black Friday for us was like I worked all Thanksgiving. There was never a break in that time. But after a while, I would joke with my teams and say, look, we're sending emails, we're not performing heart surgery. Like, so really being able to keep it in perspective for me, and on paper, my company is called Create Honesty, because I need that constant reminder, because people have asked me, like, are you going to change the name? Or are you going to branding wise and all that stuff? And I'm like, no, because I need that reminder to not, jump off the island when things get tough, or to, shift my path for reasons that necessarily aren't mine. So kind of keeping that focus and understanding what's really important for me was huge, because before I was so, proving myself and performing and pleasing, like all the Brené Brown things that she talks about. Whereas now as I get older, I'm finding myself just wanting to please myself and my family, and turning more into an introvert, to be honest with you, and more mindful of my decisions and why I do them.
I think, well, anybody that's dealt with a marketing company and they're like, hey, you need to do this. And I love that you're like, no, this is what I'm going to do. And I believe in it. Trust me, guys, there is a point in your career, at some point, somebody will say, no, you need to do this. But you're sticking to your gun saying, I need this for me to show up as the best version of me. Is that just a learned behavior, or is that just something that you've known?
That was purposeful on my part. So when I started in my company, I know how to write a business plan. I know how to write a marketing plan. I know how to do all of those things. And there was a period right when I was starting in the beginning that people were like, well, where is it? Are you going to go for funding? Are you going to do all the things, like all of the appropriate steps? And I purposely did none of those because I really wanted to undo all of that kind of programming in my head that came from my corporate stint, not the knowledge that I'd learned or the experiences that I'd had, but really I wanted to be able to hear myself think. And in order to do that, if anyone's ever come in contact with that kind of experience, you need to slow down and hear yourself. So for me, I had to work really hard at that, because I'm used to going, and I still do go like a million miles an hour, but back then I wasn't as good at hearing myself while I was going a million miles an hour, right? So I was just saying yes before I even had time to process it. So it took a lot of practice, and it still does for me to be able to do that. But at least then, all I know is I need to be able to lay my head on the pillow at night and feel good about my decisions that I'm making throughout my life. And that is kind of it, I guess, at this point.
Let's talk about that, because you're clearly a doer. You're an achiever.
I am. Yeah.
You are. I mean,
I am.
Podcast launches that high. You're an Amazon bestselling author. You have communities. You have this company. It's like, so you're achieving. But my question is, you said, as I've become older, as I've matured, I'm starting to slow down. What does that look like? Because I talk about this a lot, and I'm curious what you do. Is it meditation? Is it journaling? Is it going for a walk? I'm just curious what your process is for that.
Yeah. So I'm a big walker. I'm learning again as I get older that I need to be able to hear myself. And the place that I hear myself the best used to be writing, believe it or not. I used to love to write, but time gets a little tight for that right now. But I'm making sure that I am walking multiple times a week, and it doesn't have to be fast or intense or anything. It's actually, for me, has to be the opposite, where there are no expectations around it, so that I can kind of just let my brain go. So it's my form of almost walking meditation, I guess, in terms of slowing down. And my life is pretty abundant when it comes to what I'm doing, but it's more that it's purposeful action at this point, and not just kind of reaching for whatever next achievement there is. If I'm looking at something, it's because I want to do it, and I think that there's a good purpose behind it. And then it makes it easier for me to take action on it that way, as well as maintain my boundaries for the slowness.
Well, the walking thing, you guys, is not, this is a answer that most people go, really? I promise you, this is number one tip. If you want to just clear your mind, and get it kind of moving as well. It is fantastic. All right. So let's talk about the purpose.
Of course.
You are purposeful. I think you said your purposeful intent. I believe if I
Yeah.
were to rewind what you just said, tell me what that is with your company now. What is that purposeful intent that you're like, this is what we're doing. This is what I'm going to not achieve necessarily, but this is what I'm driving for daily.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's the marriage of work and life, and from an integration perspective with people. That's kind of at the higher level, is that I'm finding there are a lot of business coaches who are in the business lane, and then life coaches who are just in the life lane. And especially right now, that integration is basically what we're living, right? You can't, I never understood how you could, especially, at least I work primarily with females, compartmentalize those two things. Like, we're only going to talk about work because life won't impact that at all, right, guys? So, I think my main mission is to be helping people to be looking holistically at things, so that you do have a choice in how you architect your life and how you want to show up every day. I think, I can't remember the speaker, maybe it was Lisa Nichols, or somebody was telling a story on a podcast that I was listening to, and she said that when she opens her eyes every morning, instead of kind of that automatic like to-do list that pops up, it's, the first word she says is, "I'm back." Like right when she wakes up in the morning. And I was like, how cool would that be? So when I start in with clients, I treat it almost as a consulting job. Like, if you were to go into a company and you look at the current state to the ideal state of being, and I say to them before their feet even hit the ground, like, what is that thought that goes through your head? Is it I have to do this shit again? Or is it like, so my kind of bigger purpose and the thing that drives me is telling people that is a possible thing to achieve. And it may feel contradictory to what others around you are doing and the shoulds of the world. However, at the end of your life, do you want to look back and say, oh, woulda, coulda, shoulda, on, because we will on some things automatically, but where you could have taken a left instead of a right, why not? Why not do that? So, and I think that it comes back to, again, being able to integrate work and life together and look holistically at everything, and just build it yourself.
I like it. I got to dig in a little bit and understand
Of
what
course.
inspires you, because
Lots.
clearly, you've mentioned personal development, and you've mentioned some various speakers and authors that I've enjoyed reading as well. So what is it that really gets you going and out of bed and says, I'm back? I've never heard that. That's really cool.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
It is cool. I like that. But what is it for you? What's your I'm back?
I think my I'm back is legacy. And to be honest, I've given a lot of thought as to, obviously from what I'm saying here, as to how I want to show up on this planet as a human, but also how I want to be remembered as a human, whether that's through teaching of my children, whether that's through what I develop for as a company, whatever that is. When I wake up in the morning, I want to show up in this world intentionally, and not necessarily like with an ulterior motive. Like, sometimes I feel like people, sometimes when you say like I'm doing it intentionally, they think that, but just, I would like to leave my little slice of this planet a little bit better, maybe than when I came in, and just from my children's perspective, hand down the wisdom, because my mom started giving me like self-help books and stuff like that. I think I was reading like Chicken Soup from the Soul when I was like 13. I was reading Louise Hay at 16. Like, these are just things to me that over the years I realized weren't the typical things maybe the kids were reading when they were 16. But again, they come into your life for a reason. So I would love to be able to leave that little slice. So that's kind of what keeps me going, is that, and just living in a joyful space with my family. Like, I don't want to be, like you said earlier, someone will tell you like, go do this. Like, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to, hang out with my kids when I want to, and create that life that feels good to our entire family.
It is interesting perspectives with our kids when they see, mom. It's not Michelle. This is mom.
Mom. Yeah, I'm different. Yeah. To
Do
them.
they even really know what mom does?
I think my oldest son, who is 7, would say, mom helps people. Um, the 4-year-old has no idea. I think when my podcast launched at that high level, I was like, "Oh my God, guys, look at this!" And they were basically like, "Whatever, ma." Like, but at the same time, and same thing with the book. I remember I took a video of my oldest son like launching cars off the book that I had published. But at the same time, how awesome is that? Like, that for me is also a grounding force because especially when you have lots of accomplishments, your ego could get whatever. Like it could maybe not stay in check. But I know that I live in this weird dichotomy where I can launch a podcast to the top of the charts and then go, and my kids are screaming at me for snacks. Like it's just reality. And I kind of like it that way though.
So to the moms that are listening to this, because you're clearly juggling this extremely well, in my opinion, to where
Thank
you
you.
have this fulfilled personal life and you also have a fulfilled career.
Mm,
And in my opinion, they're very connected. Of course, if one's out of alignment, the other one's going to be all screwed up, right?
absolutely.
Do you have specific thoughts for maybe it's not just females, but certainly you're wearing that hat of mom, entrepreneur, you know, uh, sister and daughter and all these things that you wear. So do you have
Yeah.
some thoughts that you can really share with them that they can apply today?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one is that it's not going to be easy. I think there are some women, and especially if you look at like some Instagram profiles or Facebook profiles, like they look like they wake up from like wake up in the morning and they've got everything like perfectly balanced, and I know sometimes people think that of me too, but I think, as a parent, as a mom, when you're juggling both of these things, somebody said to me when I was first pregnant in corporate, and they said, Michelle, you need to kind of wrap your head around the fact that you will never be able to give 100% to one versus the other. And that's kind of stuck with me because I think as moms, we guilt ourselves quite a bit around, well, I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? But for me, the more I kind of look at this integration perspective, right? Number one, for my kids, it's quality over quantity for me when it comes to time. If I'm going to be there with them, but I'm checked out or I'm too tired or I'm on my phone 24/7, and I'm not saying there haven't been those days, but I want to be present with them when I'm present with them. And when I'm in work, I want to be present at work when I'm in present with work. Does it always happen that like cleanly? Hell no. Like absolutely not. But I think looking at things holistically and also pacing myself. I think there are a lot of people out there, and I mean, I move pretty fast, as you've noted, like, with things, but I look at my company and I look at my career in, long term, um, the long term of it. So I'm looking at it as a marathon, not a sprint. So for me, that almost gives me an excuse to say, okay, you know what? Today my 4-year-old wants to play. I don't have any dire need deadlines. Fine. Then I'm going to go hang out with my 4-year-old, because we are in the long game here. And I think for all the moms who feel like they need to get it right and they need to get it exact today, like at this very minute, especially given what everybody's juggling pandemic wise and homeschool wise. And now you're doing like quadruple the mental load amount of work, grace and space. I say that all the time. I give myself a lot of grace to, for lack of a better term, fuck it up. And a lot of space to heal, to feel, to think, to be very, again, mindful and purposeful in what I do. And I think also, you just need to be focusing in on your family and yourself and less on what others are doing and what others think you should be doing. Because I will tell you right now, there are some people who think, I'm too driven. There are some people out there who think, my poor husband, because I'm always working. And a shout out to my husband because we're an amazing team when it comes to this. And he's my biggest champion. But the thing is that people are always going to have an opinion. There are always going to be people that are going to have, an opinion that may not align with what you want in life. So stop asking those people,
That's amazing advice. And we actually, my wife and I talk about this all the time because she'll have people say, "Oh, what does your husband do for work?" And she's like, "Really? Like, do you want to know what I do?
Yeah,
And,
exactly. Yeah.
and it's such a team. So it's ridiculous to think that none of this happens on, I'm sure in your marriage or in mine, where I can't do the things I can do without the support,
No,
right?
no.
Gosh,
Yeah.
you said something. The advice that person gave you when you're pregnant was awful.
Yeah.
The whole idea that you can't,
Like,
yeah, like you can give 100% to your kids in that moment, and you can give 100% to your work at that moment. And the whole trick is doing that in the present moment. What do you coach people on? Is it simple as put the phone down and really be in the present? Is there certain things that you're like, hey, because I know I have certain triggers that I'm like, nope, just got to put it away. Do you have things that you coach people on?
yeah, I mean, I would say when you're sitting down on a Sunday night and you're looking at your entire schedule, I see a lot of the times people will only plan for their work meetings, right? And only look at the work side and then look at the life side separately. And when I sit down, my entire to-do list is everything. All of the things, right? So whether it's doctor's appointments, whether it's a sports game, whether it's TV time, any things as I can kind of get in there and schedule, which, is not always possible. But so number one, I'm always looking holistically at how one impacts the other and making sure that sort of, and I don't necessarily like to use the word balance because I think it implies you're either in it or you're out of it. But, I'm constantly checking myself on that. And then, yeah, I mean, that's kind of that's the main thing I'm doing when I'm coaching clients is saying, audit your schedule. Sit down and audit your schedule. And if you have three priorities, which I tend to tell people, like, what are your three top? For me, it's, my health, my family, my career. Those are kind of the three. Friends and family extended are in there too. But if I'm looking at my schedule holistically and there are things on there that don't align with those, then they kind of get nixed.
All right. So you said three. This is my favorite thing. I coach on three all the time. And
Good,
I,
good.
I dive into the research, and there is some data there, but I'm just curious. So for you, the three, is that just something that has always made sense? Do you have like empirical data that you're like, this is why I use that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just makes sense because I think it's the old thing in the back of my head that says, like, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, like that kind of focusing language, which I don't necessarily agree 110% with that, but I feel like it's overwhelming when it gets beyond three. Like, I want to know where my North Star is at all times. And I don't think it's realistic to just be one, because I think when people say put family over work, like, well, if I don't work, my family doesn't have money, and what happens then? So there's an integration that happens there as well. And I think sometimes you hear a lot of people out there who will say, okay, it's work and family. And to that, I will say, well, where are you in that? Because again, like, if you're not operating, work and family aren't operating either. So there's some dependencies within that as well. And I feel like that triangle or that trifecta is just kind of feels good to me.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. It's like you have to take care of yourself first in
Yeah.
order to take care of all these other people. I feel recently I talk about this a lot because, and again, generalizing, but a lot of time, my female clients where I'm like,
Mhm.
hey, you have to come first in order to serve all these others.
Yeah.
And the way you said it, you said health first, right?
Yep.
Didn't I hear that right? Health,
Yep.
family.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's hard because we've been told, especially, and again, I feel for the guys, no offense to you guys, but we've been told as women, stay small, stay quiet, and serve. That's what we've been told, right? Through a lot of direct messages, indirect messages, things like that. So there is that ingrained guilt. I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say, getting on this interview, my kids are downstairs getting ready for dinner, if I didn't have that little tug of like, oh, you're a shitty mom, you're getting on a podcast thing and there's dinner getting ready. But then I've learned over the years to say, no, I'm doing this for my children. And I am aware that my priorities are in check. And I know I'm balancing this. So when I get off this podcast, I'll be downstairs watching cartoons, and very well focused on them with my children. So
No, it is. It's something as long as you're aware of it, I think is number one.
yeah.
That look, be mindful, be aware of these things. So you talked about reading early, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Louise Hay, like early. So what have been, I don't know, three, since we're talking about three of
Yeah.
the most impactful books that you've ever read that have really shaped who you are and where you've gone?
So I would say You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay was a huge one for me. And I cannot remember the second one, but I remember but it was by Iyanla Van Zandt, if you can believe that. Can't for the life of remember it, but it was in my 20s, early 20s that I read it. And the book spoke all about how, not holding your parents at fault for things and how they were a product of, their parents and, how to kind of maneuver through some of that stuff. So that always sticks with me and allowed me to process through a lot of crap a lot earlier than if I had kind of not heard that message until 40, 50. And it enabled me to forgive a lot over the years. So, I mean, Louise Hay, that's two, the Iyanla Van Zandt book. And then, I don't know, I have so many. So anything by Glennon Doyle, I think I love Glennon Doyle Melton or Glennon Doyle now. And, Gifts of Imperfection, Brene Brown, big one. So I think those are kind of my go-tos if I'm looking at things nowadays, if I have to pick some.
Oh, that's good. They're good ones. I have not read. I can't even pronounce Lazant. I don't
Yeah,
know.
Van Zandt. I'll have to track down the actual title. She's published a lot over the years. I just remember the author.
So I got my favorite question to ask. It's a little deeper, but
Sure.
what does freedom mean to you?
Time freedom and money freedom, or both, any of them. I think freedom to me is the ability to have equal opportunities at your disposal and the ability to choose. I think if I had to just kind of really boil it down, it's the ability to have that seat at the table and have the equal opportunities that table presents as well, and then choose the one that you actually would like to do.
So this has come up several times where equal opportunities and some of the hardwiring that male and females we've been given through marketing or whatever, something has shaped this for you where it's like, no, I want this to be where everyone has that equal opportunity. How are we doing? How's the world going? Are you seeing that let's just go with male and female at this moment. How are we progressing in 2020 at this point?
That is a hard question. So I would think, I would love to say that we are so much better than we used to be. I think that we have made improvements. I would think every generation moves a little bit closer to kind of that ultimate goal. But I still think that we also have quite a long ways to go in regards to that, because it's people's mindset. And it's like you said, the messages that they've been given since they were younger. I mean, I have two boys, which people always crack up at the fact that I'm very like female empowerment centered. And they're like, but you have two boys. And I say, yeah, but that doesn't mean that they don't need the help too. Right. So when it comes to it's not just about women's empowerment. It's not just about chauvinism and male empowerment and all that stuff. It's about the combination of them both. And I do see a lot of dialogues where those things are coming a little closer together. And I think there could be more because it's not one or the other. They have to, in my opinion, kind of move forward together. But I mean, if you ask like my mom, she would say, yeah, this is a hell of a lot better. But I want my kids to say, my kids they don't even see the difference. But my son came home the other day and said, Mom, why aren't there any American boy dolls? Because there's American Girl dolls. So those are the conversations those kids are happening. And maybe it's just because he lives with me. I don't know. But I can't give you kind of is it better or is it worse answer, because I think it's ever changing. And I just hope and pray that we're going towards the better, just for our future generation's sake.
The hardwires are real because I am the maternal one in my relationship with my wife. Like with our kids, it wasn't even close. But that's not a negative towards her or towards me. It's just not the norm or what we were perceived to be the norm. And so we talk openly about it like, yeah, man, I was the one that changed all those diapers. Why? I don't know. I just did. That's what I thought I was supposed to do. But it doesn't matter, I guess is the point. It's like putting labels on it. It's so interesting. That's why I was just curious.
Yeah, agreed. The labels are very interesting and they, on some level, are self-serving depending on who's labeling, right?
For sure. And you even said earlier, look, there's always someone with an opinion.
Right.
Who cares? It's not it doesn't really affect you unless you allow it to, right?
Exactly.
And you having that choice.
Yeah.
What should I have asked you that I didn't know enough to ask? It's like, darn it, JM, what the heck, man? You missed this one.
I mean, you asked some pretty kick-ass questions, I'm not gonna lie. Um, I just want to speak again just to any of the women or even the dads out there who are juggling the unjuggable. Unjuggable? I don't even know if that's a word, but you know what I mean. The expectations that have been placed on everyone, especially through this time period, are completely unrealistic. And I think as a woman to begin with, they were kind of unrealistic. The have it all mentality when you may not necessarily be able to have it all at the exact same moment. But then I heard somebody reference it today as, we had kind of the normal life, but then we were given the second shift of teacher, then this third shift of carrying all the emotional weight for the family, whatever that looks like. When you have multiple different levels of trauma and processing happening within a family, and if you are the parent that is kind of holding that emotional load for everybody, you need to remember to process your own stuff. Because what we're starting to see, and I was speaking to a friend the other day who's actually like a holistic functional doctor, and she was saying what she's starting to see is she's seeing women coming in with all sorts of ailments. She's seeing the things manifesting, the level of stress manifesting because we haven't come full circle and they're so busy taking care of everybody else because that's the expectation that's been placed that they're crumbling. So what I don't want to happen is people to come out, worse. I mean, we will be a little worse because it's hard as hell, but, not able to rebound after this because they didn't look at themselves at all.
I love it. I can already see you. This title of this podcast will be Give Yourself Some Space and Grace or something along those lines, because I think it's so applicable, not only to today, but just in general. Like, give yourself a break, man.
Yeah.
You're so hard on yourself. Well, where can people connect with you online, Michelle? Because you offer so much to the world. I want them to know, like, hey, go check me out here.
Yeah, thank you. So you can find me at createhonesty.com. That is my website. And then on social media, it's the handle Create Honesty on Instagram, on Facebook. And then I have an amazing Facebook community called the Surviving Entrepreneurship Community. And you can just search that and I will pop up there. And then my podcast, The Resilient Entrepreneur, is on basically anywhere you can find podcasts. So iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, all of the places. So you can just search for that and you'll find me there too.
I love it. We'll make sure and put it in the show notes as well. I just want to thank you. I love your energy. I was on your show. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed this conversation. And I love the message that you're bringing to the world because it's so needed, in my opinion. So I hope you just keep doing what you do. And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was an amazing conversation. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
It's really my pleasure. All right, you guys, until next time, go to letsgowin.com. Check out the work-life balance assessment sheet. That is something that I do talk about, that I want people to be checking in for that holistic approach that we just talked about with Michelle. It's so important. If one is out of alignment, the other is not going to show up to the best of its ability. Check it out. It's free to you. And until next time, guys, continue to transcend in life. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to transcendinlifepodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Transcend in Life podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson, taking you from fear to freedom.